Asterisk, she thought he was a nobody? Just a quiet man living a simple life? But what if the man you fall in love with is hiding the biggest secret of all? Comma? A secret so powerful the media couldn't resist exposing it to the world. Love, betrayal, and shocking revelations. This story will keep you guessing at every turn. Stay with me till the very end because the truth will change everything. Comma. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment so you never miss more thrilling stories like this. Asterisk. Voice light but commanding. Is this seat taken? I looked up from my laptop, where lines of code blurred together, and met her gaze steadily. Not at all, I replied, gesturing to the empty chair opposite me. She studied me, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I've seen you here a few times, she said, tilting her head, always so focused. What keeps you so absorbed? Some things deserve attention, I replied simply, closing my laptop with deliberate calm. Some things are worth observing quietly without distraction. Her laugh was light, teasing, but there was an edge of curiosity in her tone. And what could possibly be so important in a place like this? I gestured to the screen I had just closed. Coding. I enjoy solving problems quietly. Most people think the work is invisible, but it matters. Small solutions often make the biggest difference. She raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. A programmer? I would never have guessed. You don't look like the type who spends hours typing away at a screen. I imagined someone more flashy. Appearances can be misleading, I said simply. Not everyone enjoys performing for an audience. Some of us prefer to create in quiet corners. Her lips curved into an amused smirk. How philosophical. I like that. Though I suspect you enjoy making people think more than you say. I prefer to observe first, I said, letting my words settle between us. Then I choose what to share. She tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle she was determined to solve. Well, she murmured, I suppose I like mysteries. People who hide more than they reveal are intriguing. We sat in companionable silence after that, two strangers from entirely different worlds, yet both fascinated by the same quiet energy that lingered between us. She glanced around occasionally, the polished public persona dropping just enough to reveal a flicker of genuine curiosity. And I, equally intrigued by her elegance and intelligence, kept my thoughts guarded, revealing nothing beyond what I wanted her to see. A quiet man, a programmer, perhaps a nobody in the public eye. As she finally rose to leave, she paused, her gaze lingering. Perhaps I'll see you here again, she said softly, as if offering an unspoken challenge. I imagine you will, I replied. That moment, brief, unassuming, almost accidental, marked the start of something neither of us could yet understand. It was the first thread of a connection that would pull us into each other's worlds, quietly, unexpectedly, and irreversibly. At first, it seemed purely coincidental, our repeated encounters, but fate has a way of weaving paths together. A week after our coffee shop meeting, I spotted Lila at an art gallery opening in central London. The night was crisp, the city lights reflecting off the gallery windows, and she stood effortlessly among the crowd, wearing a sleek navy dress that hugged her form elegantly. Our eyes met briefly, and I caught a flicker of recognition, a silent acknowledgement that we both remembered the other. She approached with a glass of champagne in hand, her smile composed but inviting. You're here, she said lightly. I enjoy seeing different perspectives, I replied, keeping my tone neutral, masking the satisfaction I felt at the coincidence. She laughed softly, her voice melodic and teasing. Observing again, are we? You have that look, like you're cataloging everything. I noticed details, I said, glancing around the room. Details that matter. She tilted her head, her eyes playful. Which details matter? The art? The people? Or perhaps, me? Perhaps all three, I said evenly, letting her interpret my answer as she wished. Throughout the evening, our paths crossed repeatedly. She navigated the room with effortless poise, her conversation light and engaging, yet I noticed how she stole glances at me whenever she thought I wasn't looking. There was a magnetic pull, a curiosity neither of us wanted to acknowledge outright, but it hung in the air like static electricity before a storm. Later we found ourselves in the same corner, away from the crowd. You don't talk much, she observed. I find that interesting. People rarely resist the urge to perform to impress. You seem immune to it. I prefer to observe first, I said, then I choose what to share. Her eyes softened, the playful edge in her expression replaced by genuine curiosity. I like that, she admitted. It's rare to meet someone who doesn't feel the need to showcase everything about themselves. Perhaps it's easier when most of the world doesn't know who you really are, I said carefully, letting the truth remain hidden behind a veil of casual words. Lila didn't press, and that pleased me. She didn't need the details to feel connected. She was learning to trust the quiet man she thought she was beginning to understand. By the end of the evening, as we left the gallery together under the glow of the street lights, I realized our repeated encounters were no longer accidental. The bond was subtle, a quiet magnetism building between us. She laughed freely, confiding in small ways, letting her guard drop in moments that felt intimate without words. When we reached the street corner where we parted, she turned to me with a half-smile. "It seems we keep running into each other," she said lightly. "I imagine we will," I replied, a faint smile touching my lips. Walking away, I felt an unexpected warmth in my chest. Lila Hart was a puzzle, intelligent, charming, and unknowingly drawn to me. And I, a quiet programmer and heir to a tech empire, felt a connection that went far beyond casual intrigue. This was no longer chance. Something was beginning, quietly, irreversibly, between us. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Lila approached me with an unexpected invitation. She had that effortless grace, even under the gray London sky, her umbrella held delicately in one hand, hair damp from the drizzle. "I'm hosting a private dinner with a few friends," she said casually, as though it were an ordinary gesture. "I think you should come." I hesitated, sensing the subtle expectation behind her words. She wasn't simply being polite. She was testing me, curious to see if I would step into her world. "I'll think about it," I replied evenly, masking the intrigue her invitation sparked in me. By evening, I found myself at her apartment building, the polished lobby and elegant chandeliers a world away from my quiet, programmed routines. She met me at the door, radiant in a deep burgundy dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a face that was both confident and approachable, eyes glinting with anticipation. "Welcome," she said, leading me inside. The apartment was a reflection of her personality, tastefully decorated, a mix of modern minimalism and cozy warmth. Books stacked neatly on shelves, candles flickering on side tables, and the scent of fresh flowers filling the air. A few friends mingled nearby, glasses of champagne in hand, but her presence dominated the room without effort. I stayed near the edges, observing. She navigated the space with effortless charm, laughing, exchanging stories, and subtly ensuring I was included without making it obvious. Every glance she cast my way, every small smile, was a silent acknowledgement of our growing connection. Finally, she found me near the window, her smile softened, yet tinged with amusement. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, tilting her head slightly. "I enjoy learning," I replied evenly, letting my calm demeanor hide the thrill of being here in her world. She laughed genuinely this time. "You're enigmatic, you know that? Most people would be intimidated. Or distracted," I said lightly, "but I prefer observing." As the evening progressed, she subtly introduced me to her friends, not as a guest to be judged, but as someone she wanted to be a part of her world. Conversation swirled around me, art, culture, business. She spoke with ease and I listened, contributing carefully when appropriate, keeping my low-profile persona intact. She never asked about my private life, and I maintained the illusion of a quiet, curious man, hiding the truth that I was the heir to a British tech empire. After dessert, she walked me to the door. Outside, rain-slicked streets reflected the city lights. She brushed her hand lightly against mine, a fleeting touch but electric. "I'm glad you came," she murmured. "So am I," I said softly, feeling an invisible thread between us tighten. As I walked home under the drizzle, I smiled. The invitation was more than casual. It was a test, a subtle opening into her world. And while she thought she was simply inviting a curious stranger, I knew it was the start of something far more intricate, a story that would unfold slowly, revealing itself one carefully chosen moment at a time. The weeks after the private dinner were a slow, delicate dance of discovery. Lila and I began seeking each other out intentionally, no longer relying on chance encounters. Mornings at the coffee shop became our ritual, her leaving playful notes on the table, sometimes teasing, sometimes insightful, and me responding in kind. Each exchange, though small, deepened our bond. Evenings were for long walks along the Thames or exploring tucked-away corners of London, quiet streets lined with bookstores, art galleries, and cafes. Sometimes we said nothing at all, content to share the silence, feeling an intimacy that didn't require words. It was in these moments that I realized how much I cherished her presence, her warmth, and her laughter, which had begun to feel like the only soundtrack I wanted. One evening, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold, we strolled along the river. Lila's hand brushed mine, a touch light but deliberate. "You're different," she murmured, her tone contemplative. "I hope that's a good thing," I replied with a faint smile, the wind tugging at my coat. "It is," she said softly. "You see things others don't. You notice but you don't judge." I chuckled quietly. "I've always believed that observation is the first step to understanding." She glanced at me, her eyes warm, her expression unusually vulnerable. "It's rare to meet someone who doesn't want to impress constantly, to perform. Most people can't help themselves." I kept my voice low, steady. "Some of us prefer to work quietly, let our actions speak for themselves." I let the statement linger without revealing too much, keeping the truth of my identity hidden. The empire I would one day inherit, my life in tech and my low-profile programming genius were still mine alone. I wanted her affection to be for the person she had come to know, not for the wealth and power she could never ignore once she knew. Later we stopped at a small cafe tucked away in an alley, rain still drizzling softly outside. Over steaming cups of coffee, she reached across the table, brushing her fingers against mine. "I like that you don't judge me," she whispered, her gaze fixed on mine. "And I like that you trust me," I replied, letting my thumb trace hers lightly. Our conversation drifted naturally into deeper territory, hopes, fears, past mistakes, ambitions. I laughed at her childhood stories and small embarrassments, and she listened to my reflections on life, careful to notice details without prying into my secret world. By the time we parted that night, the connection was undeniable. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, it was quiet, understated, built on mutual understanding, curiosity, and genuine affection. As she walked away under the glow of the streetlights, I felt a certainty I hadn't experienced in years. Lila wasn't interested in my wealth or power, she was drawn to me, the quiet programmer, the man she thought she understood. And I, in turn, was captivated by her intelligence, warmth, and unguarded vulnerability. The chemistry between us was undeniable, but it wasn't just attraction. It was the beginning of trust, understanding, and a bond neither of us could ignore, even if the world outside remained oblivious to the quiet story unfolding between us. The days and weeks following our quiet walks and cafe visits settled into a rhythm that felt effortless yet charged with subtle tension. Lila and I were no longer strangers bound by casual curiosity, we were companions exploring the edges of something deeper. Every encounter was an opportunity to understand one another more fully. Mornings often began with her notes at the coffee shop. Sometimes witty, sometimes contemplative, each message was a tiny window into her thoughts. I would respond in kind, short but deliberate, letting her see a sliver of the man behind the quiet demeanor. These exchanges, simple, fleeting, became the rhythm of our connection. Evenings, however, were when the intimacy truly flourished. Long walks under the lamplights of London, small cafes tucked into side streets, and the quiet corners of bookstores became our sanctuary. We spoke of ambitions, of dreams long deferred, and of fears rarely admitted aloud. She shared fragments of her life, the insecurities behind the confident socialite she presented to the world, the loneliness beneath the glamour. "I feel like everyone wants something from me," she admitted one evening, her voice barely above the drizzle outside. "People are drawn to what I represent, not to who I am. It's exhausting." "I listen," I replied softly. "And I notice. That's what matters." Her gaze softened and she leaned closer, a subtle gesture that carried weight far beyond its simplicity. It was in moments like these that I realized just how much I cared for her, not for her social status, her beauty, or her charm, but for the person she revealed when no one else was watching. And yet, even as our closeness deepened, I remained cautious. The truth of my life, the vast tech empire I would one day inherit, the influence that allowed me to shape outcomes quietly, remained hidden. I wanted her affection to be genuine, untainted by the lure of wealth or status. Every laugh, every touch, every shared secret needed to be earned, untouched by the knowledge of who I truly was. One rainy evening as we walked along the Thames, our hands brushed, fingers tangling naturally. "I think I like you," she murmured almost shyly as if the confession startled even her. "I think I like you too," I replied, my thumb tracing hers lightly. It was a quiet admission, yet it carried the weight of months of trust, shared laughter, and gentle intimacy. Love had begun to bloom between us, subtle but undeniable, built not on spectacle but on understanding, patience, and quiet connection. As we paused under a street lamp, the city glowing around us, I realized how much I cherished these moments. The bond between us had grown stronger than attraction alone. It had become trust, companionship, and the anticipation of something far more enduring. For her part, Lila had begun to see me as someone steady, someone dependable, someone she could confide in without fear. And for me, each glance, each laugh, each small gesture cemented the certainty that I could not imagine my life without her presence. And yet, beneath the comfort of our growing closeness, I knew the day of revelation was approaching. A day when my secret would surface, testing everything we had built. But for now, the quiet chemistry between us thrived, delicate and unstoppable. The intimacy between Lila and me deepened in ways neither of us had anticipated. Our relationship was no longer built solely on curiosity or chance encounters. It had grown into trust, comfort, and quiet understanding. Mornings at the coffee shop were no longer just rituals. They had become moments of shared humor, thoughtful exchanges, and subtle flirtation. Evenings were for long conversations, quiet dinners, and walks through rain-slicked streets that felt like our own private world. One rainy night, I found myself in her apartment, the soft hum of the city outside barely audible over the quiet of her living room. She was curled up on the sofa, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her damp hair falling in loose waves. Her expressive eyes, honey brown, warm and inviting, looked at me with a rare vulnerability I had only begun to glimpse. "You know," she began softly, "I like that you don't judge me. Most people do. They see the social image, the perfection, and immediately form opinions. You just listen. You notice." I knelt beside her, resting a hand near hers on the sofa. "And I like that you trust me," I replied gently. "That you let me in." Her lips curved slightly, and for a moment, the confident socialite facade melted completely, replaced by a softer, almost fragile presence. "It's easier with you," she admitted. "I don't have to calculate every word, every smile. I can just be myself." I smiled, feeling the quiet intensity of her trust. "That's all I ever wanted. To be here with you as you are." We spoke for hours that night, sharing dreams, fears, and small fragments of our pasts. She laughed freely as she recounted childhood mischief, awkward encounters, and moments of insecurity she rarely revealed. I shared my perspectives, reflections on life, and quiet philosophies, carefully avoiding any mention of the empire I was heir to, or the influence I wielded in private. I wanted her to love the man she knew, not the man the world would later see. Eventually, exhaustion settled in, but neither of us moved to separate. She rested her head lightly on my shoulder, and I held her close, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. In that moment, the outside world seemed to vanish, leaving only the intimacy of shared presence. "I think I like you," she whispered, a soft confession that carried months of unspoken emotion. "I think I like you too," I replied, pressing a hand over hers. Our love had begun quietly, deliberately, without fanfare. It was the kind that grows steadily, nurtured by small gestures, shared laughter, and emotional honesty. It was not flashy or performative. It was real, grounded, and deeply personal. And yet, even as the bond between us strengthened, I remained silent about my true identity. The heir to a British tech empire, a programmer who preferred to remain in the shadows. I wanted her affection to be genuine, not swayed by fame, wealth, or inheritance. I knew the day would come when the truth had to be revealed, but for now our love existed purely, beautifully, and completely. In the quiet of her apartment, I realized how much I wanted this, to grow closer, to protect this trust, and to see how far our bond could stretch before the inevitable revelation came. The months that followed felt like a quiet dream. Our days intertwined seamlessly, each moment with Lila deepening the bond we had built. There was a rhythm to our time together. Morning coffees at the corner cafe, leisurely walks along the Thames, and evenings filled with laughter and thoughtful conversation. These moments, simple on the surface, were charged with subtle intimacy, a closeness that grew naturally without urgency or pressure. One chilly evening we strolled along the river, the city lights reflecting like tiny stars in the water. Lila slipped her hand into mine, her fingers curling effortlessly around mine. The sensation, light yet deliberate, sent a warmth through me that I could not ignore. "I can't believe how much I trust you," she murmured, leaning slightly against my shoulder. "Trust is earned," I replied softly, squeezing her hand. Her lips curved into a small smile, and I could see a vulnerability in her expression that she rarely allowed anyone to witness. "You've earned it," she admitted. "I never thought I'd meet someone I could just be myself with." We paused on a small bridge, overlooking the flowing Thames, letting the quiet of the city surround us. She leaned closer, and the warmth of her presence made the rest of the world fade into insignificance. Moments like these weren't about grand gestures. They were about connection, the kind that grew quietly in shared silences, laughter, and understanding. "I like you," she whispered almost shyly as if the admission startled her. "And I like you too," I replied, my thumb brushing hers lightly. We spent the evening talking about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, small fears, ambitions, and regrets flowed between us with ease. I laughed at her stories of awkward encounters and moments of youthful mischief, and she listened to my reflections on life and the subtle joys of my quiet world as a programmer. I kept my secret carefully guarded, letting her see only the parts of me that I wanted her to love, the man she thought I was. As the night grew colder, we returned to her apartment. Inside, the warmth of the space contrasted sharply with the rainy streets outside. Sitting together on the sofa, our hands found each other again, fingers entwined naturally. The intimacy wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a quiet alignment of two hearts learning to trust each other completely. "I never expected this," she murmured, her voice low and soft, "to feel so connected to someone so ordinary." I smiled, resisting the urge to correct her. "Ordinary?" I asked lightly. "Perhaps ordinary is exactly what makes it extraordinary." She laughed, and the sound filled the room with warmth. Our love had grown steadily, built on trust, shared moments, and the quiet knowledge that we were safe with each other. Yet beneath the comfort, I knew the world beyond these walls would soon intrude, testing the bond we had nurtured. My secret, the truth of my identity as heir to a British tech empire, remained carefully hidden. For now, though, we allowed ourselves to exist in the quiet intimacy of the moment. Hands intertwined, hearts aligned, laughter lingering in the air, we were simply two people discovering love in its purest, unhurried form. The morning began like any other, but by mid-morning my phone erupted with notifications, news alerts, social media posts, and flashing headlines that screamed a truth I had kept hidden for years. The hidden heir to Britain's leading tech empire exposed, and he's the man Lila heart fell for. From programmer to powerhouse, London's best-kept secret revealed. The mystery man behind a billion-pound tech empire, finally identified. My heart tightened as I saw the frenzy unfold online. Lila called almost immediately, her voice tight with disbelief and hurt. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, trembling. I let the silence linger for a moment, knowing the weight of the revelation. "Because I wanted your love to be genuine, Lila. I needed to know you would choose me for who I am, not for wealth, power, or influence. Everything else, the empire, the inheritance, doesn't define who I am to you." There was a long pause on the other end, heavy and tense, before she hung up abruptly. Panic settled in my chest. Our carefully nurtured bond was now at the mercy of the world's gaze. Within an hour there was a knock at my door. She arrived, rain dripping from her coat, eyes wide and unsteady. I can't believe this," she whispered, stepping inside. "All this time, and you never said anything?" I held her gaze steadily. "I didn't lie. The man you fell in love with, the one you trust, laugh with, and confide in, is still me. I am a programmer, and yes, I will one day inherit the empire. But that isn't who I am in your eyes, it's irrelevant to the bond we've built." Her lips trembled and tears formed at the corners of her eyes. I feel shocked, betrayed almost. How could I have loved someone and not known who they really were? "You knew enough to love me," I said softly. "And now the world knows too. But our love was never about headlines or wealth or power. It's about connection, trust, and choice." She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know if I can process this," she admitted. "I feel like everything has changed." I reached for her, holding her hands gently. "Nothing has changed between us. The truth doesn't erase the months we've shared. The laughter, the trust, the quiet moments, those are still ours. You loved the person you met, and that person hasn't changed." Her head lifted slowly, eyes glistening as she searched my face. "So, this doesn't change us?" "No," I said firmly. "It only proves that our connection is real. Stronger than rumors, headlines, or public scrutiny." She took a deep breath, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. I do love you. That hasn't changed. I think I understand why you waited to tell me." I pulled her into a gentle embrace, feeling the warmth of her trust, the steadiness of her heartbeat. Outside, the media had exposed my identity, but inside this apartment, in our quiet sanctuary, nothing had truly changed. Our love, tested and proven genuine, remained unshaken, ready to endure whatever the world might throw at us. The days following the media revelation were tense. London streets buzzed with curiosity, reporters tried to corner me, and social media became a storm of speculation. But Lila and I retreated into the quiet sanctuary of our apartment, determined to navigate the fallout together. That evening, she arrived with her coat still damp from the drizzle, her eyes searching mine as soon as she stepped inside. "I've been thinking," she began cautiously, "about what it means, this revelation about us and everything I thought I knew." I gestured for her to sit, feeling the gravity in her tone. "I know it's a lot to process," I said softly. "I didn't intend for it to happen this way. But what matters is what we have, the bond we built long before the world knew the truth." She ran a hand through her hair, her fingers trembling slightly. "It's not just the empire, it's the control, the power. People will assume things about you. They'll expect things from me." I reached across the table and held her hand. "Expectations will come. But they don't define us. What we have, our love, our trust, our understanding, that's what matters. Everything else is noise." She looked into my eyes, searching for honesty, for reassurance, and I offered it freely. "Lila, I am still the same person you fell in love with. A programmer, a man who enjoys quiet moments, who values trust and connection over attention or status. The empire is part of my life, yes, but it doesn't change who I am to you." Her lips trembled and she exhaled slowly as if releasing a held breath. "I've never known anyone like you," she admitted. "You're grounded, patient, genuine. And I feel like I've finally met someone I can trust completely. And that's all I wanted," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "To be someone you can rely on, someone you can love for who I am, not what I inherit." The tension began to ease, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of understanding. Lila leaned closer, resting her forehead against mine. "I don't care what anyone else thinks," she whispered. "I love the man I know, and that hasn't changed. The rest, well, we'll handle it together." A small smile touched my lips. "Exactly. Together. The world can speculate all it wants, but our relationship is ours to define. Headlines, wealth, and status don't get a vote in our bond." For the first time since the revelation, she laughed softly, a sound of relief, of clarity, of renewed trust. We stayed there, hands entwined, hearts beating in quiet synchrony, finding solace in the understanding that our love could withstand the chaos outside. By the end of the evening, the storm had shifted from fear and uncertainty to acceptance and resolve. Lila and I had confronted the truth head-on, and in doing so, had strengthened the foundation of our love. Whatever challenges awaited us in the public eye, we were ready, united, unshaken, and more certain of our bond than ever before. The weeks after the revelation were a delicate balancing act. Media attention buzzed relentlessly, but Lila and I found ways to shield our personal lives while navigating the newfound scrutiny. London streets and cafes became stages for subtle normalcy, moments where we could laugh, talk, and simply exist without the weight of public opinion pressing down on us. One crisp afternoon, we walked along the Thames, the autumn leaves swirling around our feet. Lila's hand found mine as naturally as breathing, and I felt the quiet reassurance of her presence. "It's strange," she murmured, "how everything changed overnight, yet some things feel exactly the same." "Love is like that," I replied, squeezing her hand. "It doesn't bend to headlines or wealth. It grows quietly through trust, connection, and understanding. That's the part that remains untouched." She smiled, her eyes reflecting both warmth and mischief. "You've kept this part of yourself hidden so well," she teased, "and yet it's exactly why I fell for you. You're still you." I chuckled softly. "And I'm glad you did. The empire, the inheritance, it's all secondary to what we have." The following weeks were a series of small victories in privacy and patience. Lila began attending gallery openings, quiet dinners, and casual events by my side, always curious but never distracted by my family's influence. Friends and acquaintances were introduced slowly, each meeting carefully curated to balance our worlds without overwhelming our connection. One evening at a cozy riverside cafe, we reflected on how far we had come. "I can't believe how much has changed," she said, stirring her tea thoughtfully. "And yet, I feel closer to you than ever." "Because what matters isn't what the world sees," I said, meeting her gaze. "It's how we treat each other, how we connect, and how we trust. We've built something stronger than headlines and gossip. Something lasting." She nodded, her fingers entwined with mine. "I was afraid at first," she admitted. "Afraid that knowing the truth would change everything. But I see now, it's only strengthened what we have." I smiled, brushing a stray hair from her face. "Love like ours doesn't falter under scrutiny. It adapts, it strengthens, and it thrives in the quiet moments just as it did before the world knew. In the months that followed, we continued to grow together, building routines, shared goals, and dreams for the future. We laughed more freely, planned quietly, and found joy in the simple things. Cooking together, evening walks, and stolen moments of intimacy. The public might know my identity, but it mattered little to us. Our bond was ours, private and enduring. One crisp evening, as the city lights shimmered on the Thames, Lila leaned against me and whispered, "I love you, for who you are, not what you'll inherit." "And I love you," I replied, "for exactly who you are. Everything else is secondary." In that moment, I realized we had grown stronger not despite the revelation but because of it. Our love had been tested, challenged, and proven genuine. We were no longer two people merely drawn together by curiosity, we were partners, equals, and confidants. Together we had discovered the truth, that love, when built on trust, patience, and understanding, can endure anything and grow stronger in the face of the world's gaze. And as we walked hand in hand along the river, the city bustling around us, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever the future held, we would face it together, unshaken and deeply in love.